right now. And my first question is, who can benefit from the complicated energy interdependence that the EU and Russia currently face? This is a hot issue for Bulgaria right now.
Well, I think the issue for Bulgaria is that the energy interdependence of the EU and Russia are really reflected more strongly in Bulgaria and in the rest of Central Eastern Europe than they may be in bigger countries of the EU that have more options. In the case of Bulgaria today, I think Russia benefits to the degree that it has a captive market and it has the ability to take the upper hand in negotiations over prices. So the energy interdependence of Russia and Central Europe is really more important than Russia and the EU. And clearly, I think these countries in Central Europe need to have the ability to have options and work with Russia on a more equal footing.
Okay, thank you. And how do you assess the political and financial credibility of transit countries such as Ukraine in the light of the recent commercial disputes? And Turkey is an important transit country as well, but we'll get to it a little bit later.
Well, my impression of what happened in Ukraine in January 2009 is that it alerted both Russia on the one side, Ukraine in the middle, and Europe that this is a sensitive issue of the pipelines in Ukraine and supplying Europe. But my impression now for the future is that Ukraine and Russia will try to act more reasonably to head off future problems. And the reason that their actions may also be more reasonable is that Russia soon will have the ability to bypass Ukraine with the Nord Stream gas pipeline. And that will force Ukraine as well to be more rational in its reactions. But
and South Stream as well, so to bypass Ukraine.
And South Stream is also to bypass Ukraine. I think as energy prices have moved up, and also in Ukraine prices have moved up, you get a situation where Ukraine is facing more or less a world market when it faces Russia. So it's going to be accustomed also to dealing on a different level than it was in the past. I think you've had a lot of disputes between Ukraine and Russia over price, but slowly Ukraine is coming into the realization that it's going to have to pay the higher prices. And what happens then, it's interesting for Russia, is that Ukrainian energy demand declines, gas demand declines, and it will be useful to watch the degree that Ukraine's gas imports from Russia rise. They dropped pretty dramatically last year, and it looks like over the next couple of years Ukraine's gas demand is going to be low. And if Ukraine becomes more energy efficient, if it longer term, because of higher prices, uses less Russian gas, then you could get into a situation where Ukraine itself is not going to be a big export market for Russian gas. And really where Ukraine will make its money will be over transit pipelines as well. And I think Ukraine may try to be cognizant of the fact that if it wants to keep being a player in the transit market for Europe, that it's going to have to be a more reliable player.
And moving south in the region, what do you think of the prospects for the Nabucco pipeline project? Mr. Dolezal was very positive in his presentation the day before yesterday.
Well, I think Nabucco's future really hinges on, number one, it will be the supplies from Azerbaijan and how Azerbaijan settles its relationships with Turkey. And then how the companies producing gas in Azerbaijan decide that they want to potentially sell into Nabucco. The other issue, of course, is political backing, strong political backing. And you have a German company, RWE, which has taken a lead position next to the Austrian UNWE. And if the German government decides that it wants to promote this project and have some of its companies actually be buyers of this gas, that you could see Nabucco potentially materializing. Maybe not in the time frame that the project developers are looking at it, and certainly not in a time frame where I think Bulgaria needs some immediate options in order to become a less dependent, let's say, less dependent on one source of gas. But Nabucco eventually might have a future.
And the major supplier is thought to be Azerbaijan, but there are serious doubts that Azerbaijan can provide the necessary quantities of gas. So the other big potential exporter for gas is Turkmenistan. But the biggest question is, will Nabucco manage to compete with China for gas supplies for Turkmenistan?
I think Turkmenistan would have enough gas supplies to feed into Nabucco as well, regardless of China. But the issue is where it sits, how it gets it there, and the political problem of building a gas pipeline under the Caspian is so big because of the Russian and Iranian influence there that it's hard to imagine how that gets solved anytime in the near future, if ever. And Turkmenistan has very strong ties to Iran. It has ties to Russia, and I don't know whether it would risk those ties in order to build an undersea pipeline. Now, the only other way for Turkmenistan to get its gas to Europe would be across Iran, and you would need to have a political settlement by the West with Iran for that to become an option for getting Turkmen gas to Europe.
Okay, and what is the impact of the Karabakh conflict to the regional energy issues and the other local tensions in the region?
I think the Karabakh issue is critical for Azerbaijan in terms of how it sees Turkey resolving its border opening with Armenia, and if Turkey were to allow that to happen without making it conditional on a Karabakh settlement. Karabakh has clearly a role over the Azeri-Turkish relationship, and I think in the longer term, the non-settlement of Karabakh will always create instability and uncertainty in the southern Caucasus.
And to what extent are the Nabucco and South Stream seen as rival projects? What are the political and economical risks that both face today? And which one is more viable in the long run? And we are talking here about the international dimensions of the project, not the Bulgarian point of view.
Well, I suppose you could argue that it is true that Nabucco and South Stream are politically rival projects, but maybe also commercially, because in the end they may target gas from the same place.
And the same market.
And the same market demand. So they are rival projects. Again, it's a question of which has the strongest political backing and raises the financing, or is it even going to be necessary at the point in time where these projects are ready to be realized? I suppose that one of the questions for clearly for South Stream, because that's just another source of Russian supplies. I think Nabucco has the advantage to the degree that it creates diversity and optionality certainly for Central Eastern Europe. The other question is what happens longer term to demand in Europe, and what supplies are able to fill that. Is Ukraine going to stabilize enough so that you can keep getting adequate gas across Ukraine to Europe, so that you don't really need South Stream, big, expensive, difficult, complex project under the Black Sea. Both of these projects have their unknowns and uncertainties.
Okay, and it seems that Turkey has strong strategic bargaining positions on both projects. How do you expect it to exercise this bargaining power? Because we see that Turkey is a rising giant in recent years.
It'll exercise it very carefully. I think Turkey needs Russia, and to the extent that Russian gas is important